Boys, you know what's so fun about this? This is like the exact same place that I was recording a video for you earlier this week on Sunday evening as I was driving home from Des Moines. I was working in Des Moines again today, so you're getting your video from Interstate 80 once again. Today, we're going to continue our movement series. I'm not going to talk about fruit anymore, I don't think. So, continuing in the movement series, we're going to jump around a little bit. We're going to move on to the third principle in the movement series, which is the human body needs access to its full physical potential in order to survive and thrive. And in order to demystify that statement a little bit, it's story time, right? Short story long. And I'm just going to walk you through some of the just history that I have kind of gone through to really become surprisingly convicted and convinced about just ideas within this realm. So, buckle up. Let's take you on a journey here. So when I started basically engaging with influences in just the greater world of Reformed theology, I grew up in a Lutheran ELCA church. And then in high school for a couple of years, I worked at they called themselves Reformed, but there was not really anything theologically Reformed about what they were doing. Essentially just functionally a non-denom type of church. And whatever year, 2009, I think. This is a good marker for it. Mark Driscoll's, Men in Marriage, right? That's a good, landmark. Basically, listen to guys like Driscoll and Piper, who at the time were, getting really popular. Again, starting to engage with some other ideas that I hadn't yet been exposed to in my life. Was one of the first times in my life where I was engaging with material that there was a very strong sense of, hey, there's a right way to do something, and there's a lot of people doing it the wrong way, right? I didn't have a classical education, publicly educated, so things like virtue, things like order, things like, right and wrong, they weren't super strong for me growing up, other than just general Bible teaching type of stuff. But as my biblical worldview started to expand and not only just hit things that the Bible speaks very specifically on, but starting to work its way outward. So we moved to the Quad Cities in 2011, right when Sacred City was starting, sitting under Justin's preaching for now 15 years. My worldview started to develop in a way that I very quickly became convinced that the Bible had something to say about everything. And whether it was direct or not, was an opportunity for us to apply wisdom that we have gained through reading the Scriptures, through sitting under the teaching of the Scriptures. And Christ is Lord, right? Christ is Lord over all. And so what that means is, hey, we need to be very thoughtful about everything we do. We need to be very thoughtful and be seeking after what would the Lord have for us in all things, okay? So, in 2013, when I started to get a little more serious about what the Lord might have to say about my health, about what I'm eating and how I'm using my body and how I'm treating my body, right? I start doing CrossFit in Justin's garage. He teaches me a little bit about this paleo diet, and I start plumbing the depths of both things. And starting to see, hey, like this CrossFit stuff, this constantly varied functional movements performed at high intensity, this kind of seems like the right way to do this stuff. It kind of seems like this is really effective, and the human body responds really well to this thing. Hey, eating real food that God put on the earth, man, that seems like it might be the way God intended for us to eat, right? So these are just kind of high-level observations and realizations as I'm starting to engage with this stuff, right? And so over the years, as I have essentially pursued that question, what would God have for us in this arena? What should movement look like for a human being? And starting to develop convictions about, hey, this is the way you should do this thing. This is the way that a human being is intended to squat, to pull themselves over an object, to pick something up off the ground. This is the most efficient way for a person to move from point A to point B when those points are 1 mile apart, when they are 100 meters apart, when they are 100 miles apart, right? There are things we can learn through, at this point, is general revelation, through a long history of people going before us and figuring out what works best for performance. A lot of the stuff is in athletics and all of that stuff. But there's tons to learn, and there's tons to say about, hey, like, the human being should be able to do certain things. Okay, so the principle is the human body needs access to its full physical potential. So what that really means is we can observe that human beings are designed to be able to squat to a depth that their knee is in full flexion, their knee is out over top of their toes, reaching past if you draw a vertical line up from your toes, reaching beyond that point, hip in full flexion, right? Human beings should be able to sprint and get into this position of hip extension, global hip extension, and recycle and recoil, should be able to jump and rebound and receive force, and all of these different things, right? Put your arms over your head, support load overhead, pick up heavy things off of the ground, all of these different things, okay? We can see that should be a part of human nature. It should be a part of the human experience. And we've got doctors, I'm going to say that in quotes because I don't know that, I'll just leave it at that, and other authorities, I should say, who are saying, never squat past 90 degrees, right? Never do a push-up with your chest touching the ground, okay? And these, quite frankly, asinine statements that just are not grounded in reality. And there is something that's being stripped away from the human experience when we say, don't do that. Okay? I think we as human beings should have a whole heck of a lot of freedom with our movements, our movement patterns, our positions, what we do with our bodies. And the reason why we wouldn't is quite simply when we have lost access to these things that should be either natural or should be able to be built. Okay, for example, a kid doesn't come out the womb being able to sprint at top speed. Okay, speed is something that is built through an experience of running faster and faster and faster and trying to keep going and going and going, right? So that has to be developed. Strength is another example of that, right? But some of these things like positions, okay, like toddlers have the most beautiful squats you've ever seen because they spend tons of time rolling around on the ground. They spend tons of time sitting down in the bottom of their squat. It is their resting position, right? And at some point throughout childhood, likely when a kid spends the majority of their time sitting in a desk, for their 12, 13 years in their lower education, and don't participate in anything that would be mitigating some of that damage, lo and behold, we see, hey, these kids can't bend their hip and their knee and their ankle to full range of motion, right? They can't support these positions with a stable midline, and on it goes through a life of the modern sedentary lifestyle, and we slowly just lose access to all these things that should be natural to the human being, right? Because we do stuff like sit in stupid trucks and drive across the state to make some money to feed our families, right? So there's a piece of it that I could suppose I could say it's sad that we live lifestyles that have lost these things, but there's part of it where you don't argue with reality, right? This is what modern life looks like. I got to drive a couple 100 miles to do a job today, and I'm going to be sitting my butt in this chair. So we need to be doing things like training these positions and getting exposure to these positions to mitigate some of the modern damages that are caused because we do stuff like what I'm doing right now. So I have a ton more to say on this topic, but just as a high-level overview of what the heck does this even mean, well, that gives you a little glimpse into what this really means. Human beings are supposed to do a lot of things physically. Cool things, really cool things, like squat, right? And modern life has a knack for stripping us of those abilities. So one of our principles is humanity needs access to its full physical potential in order to survive and thrive. All right. See you guys in the next one.